Hello again, everyone. You're watching Tatiana's Tiny Zoo. I'm Tatiana, and in today's video, we will be setting up a bioactive toad enclosure. I'll be showing you step by step everything you need to set up your own toad habitat. And next week, I'll be releasing a cane toad care guide, which breaks down everything you need to know about caring for these little guys after you've set up your enclosure. If you're interested in that care guide, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's get started. The first thing you need is a suitable enclosure. I have a cane toad, and these guys are notorious for getting pretty big. This habitat is 24 by 24 by 18 inches, and I might have to upgrade to something larger if my toad turns out to be a female. Depending on the species you plan on keeping, your toad might need more or less space. As I'm setting up the enclosure, you can see I'm attaching the door hinges, and I'm also siliconing all of the edges of this enclosure. I've had problems with tanks leaking in the past, so now I just seal up all of the edges to prevent potential problems later on. Because the enclosure I'm using wasn't designed to be bioactive, I also went ahead and installed a substrate barrier. I did this by cutting a piece of plastic to the correct size and then siliconing it in place. Once the silicone was cured, I started filling the enclosure up with substrate. The substrate mix I used is eco-earth, sand, reptisoil, and aquarium soil. Most toads like to burrow, so I recommend adding several inches of substrate. Toads don't like being out in the open, so it's important to add some hiding areas for your amphibian as well. Driftwood, cork, or reptile hides all make good additions to your enclosure. Feel free to be creative with your layout. Next, it's time for plants. I'll include a link in the description that has safe plants to use in bioactive enclosures. Plants are also a really great way to offer additional hiding opportunities for your animals. For example, this fern has huge leaves, and I often catch my toad sitting under them. I added this button fern as well, and some oak leaf creeping fig to offer more coverage and texture as it grows over this log. Live plants help keep the humidity higher in your enclosures, but another thing I like to add is sphagnum moss. I'll soak this stuff really well and then add thick pockets of it throughout my habitat. Then, once a week or so, I'll mist these moss piles really well. This gives my frog an opportunity to sit and burrow into it if they need a higher humidity. Finishing the enclosure off with one last hide, which is the perfect little burrow for my toad. No bioactive is complete without a leaf layer. The leaves protect your substrate by keeping the humidity trapped down in the soil, and as the leaves break down over time, they will release nutrients back into your substrate. Time for a really good misting. After that, I added my cleanup crew. I used dwarf purple isopods as well as springtails inside of this enclosure. The cleanup crew of a bioactive enclosure is what really makes the habitat come full circle. These little invertebrates will munch on the leaf litter as well as clean up any waste left behind by your pets. They complete the cycle by breaking all of this organic matter down into nutrients that the plants will then absorb from the soil. It's really like taking a slice of nature straight from outside. Now that the enclosure itself is complete, it's time for the last steps before I can introduce my froggy friend. One important piece that was missing was the door. I went ahead and attached it to the enclosure using the provided screws. I added a water dish as well. All toads love access to fresh water. Mine soaks in this dish pretty much every night. I should add that this build has a Jungle Dawn LED plant light to keep the plants healthy and thriving, as well as a UVB bulb for Mr. Toad. The enclosure's temperatures are monitored using a Herpstat thermostat and temperature probe. If you're interested in specific temperature and humidity levels for cane toads, make sure to check out the cane toad care guide that's coming out next week. Depending on what toad species you have, they might have different requirements, so please do your own research if you have a different species than me. After one last thorough misting, it was time to put Toad into his new home. I do want to give a quick shout out to the enclosures I'm using in this video. They are made by a company called PM Herp. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them in any way, but I do really like the quality of these habitats and how easy it was to work with them. I simply went to their website, which I'll link down below, and then emailed the enclosure specs I was looking for. A few weeks later, the enclosures arrived in the mail and they were in great condition. If there's anything to nitpick over, I'd say that you guys should definitely change the tape you're using to secure the hardware to the enclosure. I had to scrape tape residue off of the enclosures and the door for literally hours because the glue had fused to the plastic. And I would maybe offer more options with added ventilation, because these vent holes you see here, I had to add myself. Otherwise, I love these enclosures and I think the design is very sleek and easy to set up.
And I'm so happy with the result. Toad has settled in nicely. I've had him in here for a few months now and he's doing great.
Well, that's all I'm gonna say about this enclosure build. If you're interested in details like lighting and temperatures or my feeding schedule, stay tuned for next week's video that will be an in-depth cane toad care guide.
Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. A huge shout out to my Patreon supporters who always get to see my new enclosures first, sometimes months before anyone else. And I'll see you guys in the next video.